All right, welcome to the Imperfectly Inspirational Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bowman. We're so glad that you're tuning in this week. You know, last week we did the Beatitude, Blessed be the Merciful. And I tell you what, I'm so excited still just about that episode because there is not a point in time in my life where I'm not going to be grateful and excited about all that God's mercy has done in my life. And I'm grateful for all of his mercy. But we're going to continue on through our Beatitude series, and we're going to talk about one that really speaks powerfully to our world right now and the state of it. It is, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And that's in Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, and it's straight from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear the word peace, I kind of think of this quiet moment, these calm surroundings, and there's no conflict. There's nothing going on. And it's a great feeling, right? But when Jesus is talking about peace, he's not just talking about keeping peace, keeping that moment. He's calling us to make peace, make those quiet, calm moments, right? And I want us to understand that there is a big difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. So let's break this down. What is the difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker? Well, a peacekeeper is someone who is avoiding conflict at all costs. They're going to tiptoe around all the issues. They're going to try to sweep things under the rug and really just, they want to maintain this harmony no matter what they have to do, even if it means ignoring the real problems. The peacekeepers, they're focused on preventing trouble by avoiding confrontation. They don't want to make anybody mad. And I'm sure we've been there in our lives, or we know somebody or a situation where we've seen that happen. But a peacemaker, it's a whole different thing. A peacemaker is someone who is stepping right into the middle of that conflict with this goal to bring out true reconciliation. Peacemakers, they're not avoiding hard conversations, but instead they lean into them with grace and truth. They're pursuing real peace, not just, fake peace, this peace that looks good on the outside, but is really a war behind the scenes, right? They're pursuing real peace, and they're not ignoring the real issues that are happening, but they address them instead. But remember, when they go into addressing these issues, they're not going into it angry. They're not going into it with, a whole bunch of harshness. They're leaning into this issue with a heart that really is desiring healing and restoration in that situation. So that's your difference. But now let's go back and see what peacekeeping was like in Jesus's time. As we've done throughout all of these Beatitudes, we've tried to take a step back in time and kind of put this Beatitude in the moment that Jesus was speaking. And to really understand it, we need to look at what Israel was like in the first century. We know that it was anything but peaceful over there. The Jews at that time, they were living under the Roman occupation, and there was political unrest, religious tension, and a lot of social divides. Really, nothing has changed. But we have the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They're constantly clashing over the interpretations of the law, and these zealots, they were eager to overthrow the Roman rule. And here comes Jesus in the midst of all of this, and he's saying, blessed are the peacemakers. Now you can imagine how kind of radical that would have seemed to people at the time, especially when the Jews were looking for this Messiah that was going to overthrow Rome with this powerful army to get peace through power, right? But Jesus, he came to establish this different kind of kingdom, one that was not built on violence and dominance, but one that was built on love and humility and reconciliation. And the good thing about Jesus is we can reflect that because he lives in us. But I want us to look at some other examples of peace because, our Bible is full of peacemakers. We see this in the Old Testament. Abraham in Genesis 13, when this dispute arose between the herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen, Abram took this initiative to preserve peace. He said here in Genesis chapter 13, verses 8 and 9, let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. In this moment, Abraham valued peace over personal gain. He allowed Lot to choose first, even though Abraham had the right to choose. That right there is peacemaking in action. It's putting relationship above rights. We see the story of Joseph. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if you are, you really know how powerful it is. It's a great example because after being betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery, Joseph, we would assume that he had every right to seek revenge when he rose to power in Egypt, right? But instead, he chose forgiveness. He chose forgiveness and reconciliation. You can read that in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, when he's telling his brothers, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." We see that Joseph's willingness to forgive and to restore his family, it is showing the true heart of a peacemaker. And we can look continuing into the New Testament and the life of Jesus. His life is embodied in peacemaking. Think about it. His entire mission was to reconcile sinful humanity to a holy God. We see in Romans chapter 5 and 1, it reminds us that, therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Our sin, it created separation from God, but Jesus stepped into the conflict, and he took the punishment that we deserved, and he ended up making peace through his sacrifice on the cross. And then you can see the echoing of that in Colossians chapter 1, verse 20. It says, "And through him to reconcile himself of all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross." Jesus did not just talk about peace. He made it possible for us to experience true and lasting peace with God. And now, as his followers, we are called to reflect that same kind of peacemaking in our relationships. So, we may ask this question: what does it mean to be a peacemaker? What does it look like in today's world? And I think we can all agree that our world is really anything but peaceful. We're surrounded by political division, cultural conflicts, and so many broken relationships and disagreements. But Jesus is still calling us to be peacemakers in the middle of all of this. So, some ways that we can, look at this in our world is peacemaking in our relationships. One of the most practical ways that we can be peacemakers is by addressing conflict with humility and grace. We see this example in Matthew 18 and 15. Jesus says, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother." Notice how Jesus doesn't say, ignore the problem and hope it goes away. No, he tells us to go, have that hard conversation, and seek restoration. Peacemaking starts in our homes. It starts with our spouses, our children, and our friends. The next thing we could do is bring peacemaking into our communities. See, being a peacemaker also means standing in the gap in our communities. It means listening to those who are hurting and advocating for justice where it's needing, and building those bridges where we can see division. We see in James chapter 3, verse 18, it says, "And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." When we work to bring understanding and unity in our workplace, our schools, our neighborhoods, we're sowing seeds of righteousness that can bear eternal fruit. The next place we could look at is the church. Because let's be real, friends, churches, they're not immune to conflict. They're full of humans, right? But as followers of Christ, we're called to protect the unity of the body. We see in Ephesians 4 and 3, it says, it urges us to be eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. That means we need to be quick to forgive, slow to take offense, and we need to be willing to pursue reconciliation when misunderstandings arise. And in a church, they're going to happen. Next thing we can do is bring peacemaking in this divided culture. That's kind of hard, right? In this world, it's consumed by social media, debates, and arguments. And, peacemakers, we're going to choose a different path, right? Rather than adding to all that noise and being a keyboard warrior, we're going to try to listen. We're going to try to seek understanding, and we want to respond with grace. And, I read this one last week as well, Proverbs 15:1. "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Online platforms can either be a place where we can fuel division or we can cultivate peace. And as peacemakers, we are called to model Christ in every interaction, whether it be online or offline. Whether you think you're anonymous or not, always pretend like you are not anonymous, because guess what? You may do it. Nobody may know who you are when you're inciting conflict, but God knows. Remember that. So I want us to be honest, though, in this situation, because being a peacemaker is not easy. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that being a peacemaker is some joyous, beautiful ride, along a mountain road. No, it's not. It requires courage, humility, and this willingness to be misunderstood. That's right, misunderstood. They're not going to understand why you're doing what you're doing unless they're a Christian. Peacemakers, they often face this opposition because they're confronting uncomfortable truths and they're challenging injustice. But here's the reward, though. What does it say? Blessed are the peacemakers, for what? They shall be sons of God. Why? Because when we pursue peace, we end up reflecting the heart of our Heavenly Father. See, Jesus, the Prince of Peace, they call him that for a reason. He gave his life to reconcile us to God, and when we follow in his footsteps, we demonstrate that we are truly his children. Now, how can we be peacemakers ourselves? What are some quick practical ways that this truth can apply to us today? Well, one, be quick to forgive. Don't hold on to bitterness. Let go of offenses and extend grace, just as Christ has shown to us. Have those hard conversations. Remember, don't avoid conflict. Step into it, but step into it with a heart of love and a desire to restore. Stand for justice. Where there's injustice, speak up. Peacemaking isn't passive. It's actively pursuing righteousness. And I know some people may not like this, but when I say stand for justice, stand for those who cannot speak for themselves. And in this case, I'll use this platform to say, speak up for the unborn. They don't have a voice. That's an injustice. That's an innocent life. There's moments where we should speak up and talk for those who cannot, for those who are being hurt, those who are innocent. And we have model unity. This world is divided, friends. And the church should be that beacon of unity. So be intentional about building relationships. Build those relationships over the differences that you may have within the church. And as we wrap up today, I want to challenge you. Where is God calling you to be a peacemaker? Maybe it's in your family or at work or maybe within your community. Wherever it is, step into that space with courage, knowing that when you make peace, you're reflecting the heart of God. And folks, I appreciate each and every time that you tune in and listen. And this Beatitude series has been a wonderful series to go through. As I said a couple episodes ago, I've learned a lot as I've studied and gone through this. And I pray that as we go through this Peacemaker episode, that God's going to give you the strength and that grace to be that peacemaker in those places that he's planted you. And I hope that as I say that prayer for you, I hope that you're praying that same prayer for other people in your life, people you may know who may struggle with that peacemaking ability, because it's all up to us. We all have to work together to be peacemakers in this world that is so full of conflict. But until next time, folks, I thank you for tuning in. As I say each and every week, I love each and every one of you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.